Hello and welcome to the Final Fantasy Entertainment and Podcast Network, Final Fan TV, and today we are spotlighting the Final Fandom. We have Tifa, the monk, here today to talk about all of this info dump that just got out about Rebirth, Crisis Core, and even a little bit of Ever Crisis. Monk, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm really, really excited to talk about everything that just got dumped on us. I mean, not only the trailer, but then just yesterday having all these interviews come out and everything, and just pretty much confirming everything that I wanted to know, like putting at ease any of the concerns that I might have had. And I'm just really excited for everything that's coming. So yeah, I'm definitely ready to dive headfirst into this.
Awesome. Okay, so what I love about what you just said is that we're going to have a little bit of a I think, I mean, it's going to be good. It's going to be good. We have opposite ends of the spectrum here where you said that it kind of confirmed everything that you were hoping for and that you feel real good about it, right? So we're on my side of things. I'm feeling a little bit like, I'm feeling a little bit, I guess, uneasy, I guess is the word I would say. So this is going to be interesting. But we, of course, we have the Fire Fighter, Vinny.
So, I'm most excited to talk about Crisis Core since I've never actually got to play it, and I have a lot of questions and kind of want to see how you guys feel about everything that was said in those interviews regarding Crisis Core. So that's what I'm going to be probably harping on.
Okay, awesome. All right, this is good then. So what I love about this monk is that when you had contacted us a few weeks ago, it was actually during the big 25th anniversary celebration, and all of this info got dropped, and I was like, I'm so sorry, monk, I gotta push it back. And I was like, man, by the time this, it's gonna be old news, and I felt so bad. But guess what? Just the other day, or just yesterday, or something, we're good. We got stuff to talk about. All right, so let's.
It was perfect timing. It could not have been timed better.
Yes, yeah, exactly. All right, so let's dive right in. So we have a ton of interviews that came out with the developers of Crisis Core and Rebirth and all the Final Fantasy VII stuff. Katase, Nomura, and let's jump into let's start with Crisis Core. Let's start with focusing on Crisis Core first. So with Crisis Core, one of the things that came out of this of these interviews was that the story is going to remain unchanged. There will be no changes at all. It'll be a very faithful retelling of the original Crisis Core. So there are no new story elements added or any changes, or any changes or anything like that. And that's a quote coming directly from the. I didn't get it. Is it the producer, Sato? Is that the producer? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's coming directly from there. So no changes. Now, Nomura follows that up with saying, we wanted to make sure that Crisis Core was seen as a part of this whole remake project. Simply calling it a remaster seemed like it would make it feel like the odd one out. Like it didn't quite fit into the series seamlessly. That's why we went with the reunion title. And this is coming from inverse.com by Hayes Madsen. So the full article will be in the link or in the description. So right there, monk. In my opinion, I'm getting kind of conflicting. It's not like super contradicting of each other, but it's a little conflicting to me to where I'm like, I'm expecting that this flows right into Rebirth. I'm expecting that this is not, we're not going to get the same ending. If you catch my drift here, I think spoilers are fine at this point. This game, we know what happens to Zack. So,
Right.
Monk, what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are, and I know I'm kind of the minority in this because and I understand the views everyone else has on this. Like, everyone has this very strong belief that, Zack is just, he's still alive and he's gonna go join up with the party and all that other stuff. But I'm not of that same mindset. So this information isn't all that contradictory, at least to me.
Okay.
Because I'm of the belief that Zack is actually not alive in Rebirth.
That's very.
Now, I could be wrong. I could absolutely be wrong, but I think there's a lot of red herrings that are being floated around. I think we're being misled deliberately by the developers. But think about it. They pretty much just confirmed it right here by saying that this Crisis Core is directly connected to the remake project, while at the same time not contradicting, staying faithful to the original. So what does that tell you about Zack's status? It tells you that what happened at the end of Crisis Core still happens. And it also goes along with what we heard Aerith say in the trailer, where she says, what's happened in the past is set in stone.
Mm-hmm.
You can't change what has happened in the past.
So if you don't...
following that line of thinking, what has happened in the past with Zack still has happened. So we don't know. There is still a mystery there. There's still some unanswered questions, which I think is what Nomura is talking about later on in this same interview, where he talks about there's a mystery unfolding, and I think that is what's going to tie it to the remake project. However, I am glad that they're leaving Zack's ending the same, because to me that's such an iconic moment, and honestly it's the most emotional and one of the most it's what makes Crisis Core such an impactful game. If you take that scene out, then it loses a lot of its significance. Do you understand? And so for me, it's important to keep that scene intact, for me anyway.
Well, it sounds
as someone
like...
who is a Zack fan, and someone who is a fan of his role in the story.
Well, it sounds like me and you, and I'm sure Vinny too. But well, you haven't played Crisis Core, but yeah, that is one of one of my favorite endings in all of gaming. Actually, like I would say, just like in any video game that I've played, I think that's one of my top favorite endings. And I think the conversation would definitely lead into, as you said, it takes away the significance of that death. So if you have... Now I see it going in this direction. So like you said, the past has happened. And if, let's just say that Zack did cross into the same time frame as Aerith and Cloud and the company, going their way as they pass each other. And just Zack is just there now. He lives on. It makes it seem like this. Okay, the past did happen. So Zack needed to die for Cloud to continue on, become the mercenary, meet Tifa, get in the Avalanche, meet Aerith, bring the Aerith to her death in the live stream, so that way she could stop the meteor, stop Sephiroth. All of this stuff happened so that way they could go back into the past, and then now it's being altered, it's being changed. So his death did mean something. It's just now he's alive again. And I think, for me personally, if that is the case, like if all of that tracks with you, and if like anybody watching this, if that tracks is like, yeah, I guess that could happen. I guess that's the case. Does that take away still, like even still, does it take away from his death? So he died, so that way all of this stuff could happen, all of the events of the original could happen, Advent Children could happen, and now his destiny has changed, his fate has changed. For me, that really is a comic book. Like that just, it doesn't feel like, to me, it doesn't feel like Final Fantasy VII to bring him back. So I like where you're going with it, Monk. I like where I would love to hear a little bit more about that as well. Where you say you don't think he's actually alive. You think, I'm assuming that you think that he's still living on in the live stream, or how can you clarify on that? You don't think he's actually alive?
I don't, and I don't know exactly. Like, I'm still a little wobbly on like what exactly his status is. I've heard a couple of different theories from friends of mine that are definitely intriguing and sound plausible. Like one of them, of course, being, he doesn't realize he's dead, and he's like when he comes to the church and he doesn't see Aerith there. And I don't know how strong I am in this, but it is very interesting that when Zack bursts into the church, no one responds to him. Like they can't even see or hear him. Because when you see that scene when he comes into the church at the end of Rebirth,
and nobody even looks.
He bursts in. No one bats an eye. No one responds to him at all, which I find very interesting.
That is a great observation. Honestly, I didn't really pick up on that. I mean, you just kind of figured everybody was in there like they're all looking pretty sad and depressed anyway. But I mean, when somebody barges into the door, you think they would just go, "What the heck?"
Yeah,
that's interesting.
And another thing too that was pointed out is this is a line from the OG, and I'm not I can't recall exactly if they touched on it in remake or not, but in the OG, when Elmira is talking about losing her husband, Aerith walks up to her as a child and says, the spirit of your husband came a long way to say goodbye. Because there's this whole mythos around, when a loved one dies, they go and they try to find their loved one before they are absorbed into the life stream. So Zack returning to Aerith's church after he dies to say goodbye to her might have some sort of connection to that.
Okay. That's that is I also had the theory that, and I guess it kind of lines up with yours as well. You ever seen Lost? Like, you ever watched the series Lost?
I have not watched it, but I've heard plenty about it, as well as the horrible way it ended. But
whoops, because this is like the ending of Lost. It's in my opinion, I'm like, what if Zack is in like this flash sideways? Because they were doing flashbacks, then they did like a flash forward, and then they did a flash sideways, which was like the flash sideways were all these people that were actually dead, and they were all living their lives within this world. It's basically like a purgatory, waiting for everybody to group up, and then they can walk into the afterlife together. And I was like, I wonder if that's kind of lines up with what Zack is doing right now. And like, honestly, it's so interesting. But see, I guess where I would go with it from here is, if that is the case, which I don't ever like say that a theory is wrong. Like, whatever. I mean, I don't discourage a theory. I think let's roll with it. I think what is the point to the story? Like, what is it adding to the story if Zack is living on? Is it to say goodbye, or is it to, like, I mean, I guess in Advent Children we see that him and Aerith are together in the live stream, so I guess they did get to meet back up. They got to link back up. So what is the meat of Zack right now? Like, why? I'm sorry. Actually, you know what? Don't quote me on that one. What is the meat of this story,
To answer that, of course, that is just assuming I'm even remotely close to being right on any of this. Again, this is just a theory. I could be completely wrong about this. I absolutely will raise my hand in the air and say, I could be completely wrong about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's all good.
This is just a theory.
We're all probably very wrong. It's all good.
I've accepted to a certain degree that I have no idea what the heck is going to happen. I've just decided that I'm going to take the developers at their word, and you know what? If the developers end up not being right about this, then I'll whine and complain about it. Yeah. But until then, I'm just going to try to keep my theories and everything as close to what I think the developers are trying to get across at this point in time with the information that they've given us. Okay. And so, to answer your question of what would be the purpose of having Zack be around, well, number one, the developers have said multiple times that they want to recreate in the players the same kind of emotions that they were able to invoke in the players in the OG. Now, there was this whole big old mystery around Zack in the OG. They can't use that same card again with Rebirth because we already know who Zack is.
Yeah.
So what better way to kind of invoke a certain amount of mystery around Zack and get people invested in him, in this mystery around Zack, than to raise some sort of question about whether or not he might be alive or not. And the same goes for Aerith, because a lot of people are, now the question is arised in the fandom, is Aerith going to live this time? Is she going to die? What better way to invoke that same level of shock and of course they're not going to be able to be completely successful in that because you have people like me who are not falling for it one iota, but there's people in the fandom who are falling for it again.
Yeah.
And the developers are going to come in and they're going to yank the rug right out from under them, and they're going to create that level of shock again, like, oh, and they might even be able to induce an added level of depth to her death this time around by making it clear that there is absolutely nothing you can do to stop it.
Okay, I like where you're going. It's so the purpose of this, although it may be unknown to us at this moment to really know what's going on, is to recreate that feeling. I see where you're going with it. So maybe the whole live stream scene will be the answers to this mystery rather than, because we already know what happened to Cloud. We already know his backstory. We already know Zach's backstory, and so
and if I might add. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, like, the live stream, falling into the live stream and everything, maybe that is the whole mystery that's going to be, like, unveiled, because they need that unveiling moment, whereas if they do the live stream scene, and they do the whole unveiling moment of Cloud's backstory, it's going to be like, yeah, we knew that, but it's cool. I like it. I love it, right? But it's to invoke that feeling is what you're saying. Maybe this is the mystery that will be solved.
And I'm trying to find the exact spot because I saved a bunch of screenshots from the interviews yesterday. I don't know if you gentlemen read this part, but at one point in one of the interviews yesterday, Nomura specifically mentioned the fact that we as the players know the mystery around Cloud's identity and everything in the live stream scene. I think he even specifically mentioned that. And saying that he wanted to add an added layer of mystery to that to kind of re-engage the player. So I think that all this thing with Zach and everything is going to tie into the live stream scene because they want that scene to hit again. Because every time you hear the developers talk about the live stream scene, talking about, oh, this is the climax of the game, this is, and it's one of their favorite scenes in the game because it's where all the pieces come together and everything suddenly makes sense. All the breadcrumbs that they had been laying out throughout the game, they all of a sudden make sense in this one scene. I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to add an added layer of mystery. And I don't know exactly how that's going to play out, obviously. I'm as clueless as the rest of you guys about what they're planning. But I think it's all going to make sense later on in the game, like it's all leading up to that, because they want, like I said, they want to recreate those same emotions and that same mystique, and they're trying to recreate those same sensations in the players that the original did. It's a full-on experience that they're trying to make, and that in essence is them also honoring the spirit of the original by getting you excited about these things again.
Yes.
While still keeping the heart of the story the same, still keeping all the faithful elements of the story intact, while at the same time, basically, again, play on words, rebirthing the game, making it new and exciting again.
Yeah. So, like, one of the things right here, Katase says, this is from 4Gamer, it's translated by Turquoise Hammer, says, the crux of the story hasn't changed. By providing new mysteries that differ from the original game, we hope to make the game fresh and enjoyable even to players of the original. On the other hand, there are parts where we've made some modifications to how the game progresses, and then he goes on to talk about, maybe there's going to be some omissions of, or not omission, but like change in the way the story is, like what's location you visit next and stuff. But the thing that gets me is the crux of the story hasn't changed. So crux meaning the most important, the most defining trait. So the crux hasn't changed. Now this is one thing that I kept on, for me personally, and I love how this conversation, like, let's start with Crisis Core, and now we're just like all over the place. I love it. But but yeah, so I got hung up on this one. So somebody asked me, how you feeling about all the information? I said I'm still digesting it, and then regurgitating it, and then trying to digest it again. I just couldn't digest this part specifically. The crux of the story hasn't changed, and I think to myself sometimes, I've been open about this, where I think that remake they did kind of a very similar thing with the marketing leading up to Remake, where it felt like they were promising something just so that way it's like, hey, think this way so we can surprise you left field type thing with something completely different. And they, you know, they were like, hey, Remake is going to be faithful to the original and all these other things. Although there's a whole lot more to that, where I might have even missed some things, or maybe even chose not to believe some things. I think I might make a whole video on this, where the signs were there, but I didn't quite pick them up as much as I wanted to. So now my eyes are open, and I'm like more aware of how the developers talk and how they are in the interviews specifically. So saying the crux of the story hasn't changed had me thinking, like, maybe they truly believe that they are keeping the original intact. Like, they are maybe these developers aren't trying to be bait and switch, which is something that's been thrown around.
Yeah,
right.
I believe that 100%. Like, I think that they're. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
I'm
you're okay.
with you.
You're okay. Yeah, yeah.
It's just that is exactly, I think, the point. I think there's like a disconnect between what the fandom wants and what the developers have been trying to put out there. There's always been some kind of disconnect, I think, between what the developers are trying to show and what the fandom is willing to accept, I think. Because if you think about it, and I think it has to do a lot with mindset too, because a lot of the developers, they have like this, there's like the spirit of the thing where they're trying to show it, like there's a certain message, I guess I'm trying to say, that the original gave, and they're trying to say that, look, we're keeping the same message, you know, even if the delivery is a little bit different, the same message, the same iconic moments that you liked back then, we're keeping those. And it's not just going to be a simple update. We're going to expand on things. Like, let me give you an example. You know, I see that you brought up part 1. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to the marketing of part 1. I was kind of observing from afar at that point, because I guess I was kind of jaded at that point. I was like, oh, this game is going to take forever to come out. And so I was just kind of like not active in the fandom at that point. I didn't start becoming active until like late 2019. But even then, the developers were dropping all kinds of hints, like, you know, we're expanding everything. We're making the characters come alive. You know, we're adding a lot more dialogue. We're delving into these characters, and they're adding things in from the compilation. Like, for example, you know, some people have talked about the way that, you know, Tifa has changed since the OG. But has she really changed? Or has she been expanded upon?
Yeah,
see, that's where the disconnect happens.
Flesh out the character more, yeah.
People think that if something has been expanded upon and it changes their perception of something, for example, you know, like the childhood, you know, Tifa and Cloud's childhood has often been completely misunderstood in this fandom. But, you know, now that Nojima is going in there and he's writing whole novels about their childhood and stuff, people's perceptions of their childhood, some of it is different, and some people are like, oh, this is a retcon, and other people are like, no, he's explaining things, he's expanding upon it. This is untraveled territory. We only saw a brief glimpse of this in the OG, but now he's going in there and he's showing everything in detail and explaining everything much better. So now your perception of it has changed. It's not a retcon.
So to be honest with you, that right there is exactly what I had in mind when I was reading all of the pre-release interviews. I followed everything on Remake before it came out. I was so excited. So that's the kind of stuff that I had in mind leading into it. So I was like, oh, they're just going to flesh out stories, expand upon it, maybe introduce a new character or two. Let's go to Jesse's house. That was cool. So things like that. But where I'm kind of like circling back to would be the drastic changes. So I don't think that's a drastic change. I think that's fine. Like, I think really improved Tifa, and pretty much every character has been improved and fleshed out more. I think where it comes down to is these drastic changes as far as, and maybe you're right, Monk, this would be great. And I mean, I'd love to see how it plays out. But Zack being alive at the end is a drastic change to what I feel is the crux of Final Fantasy VII. So where it comes down to like the crux of Final Fantasy VII being tragedy, death, how you cope with that with friends and all this other stuff, and I feel like fundamentally Final Fantasy VII is already changed. So where it comes down to Rebirth, where they're saying like, hey, it's going to be, we're I'm trying to find the quote from the interview, but I remember him saying in one of the interviews, basically saying that we're not messing with the story of Final Fantasy VII original. It's just we're introducing new mysteries and all this other stuff. But at what point does that crux? At what point does it become unrecognizable to the original? Is my question. So that's what I've been personally wrestling with. Is at what point is this an unknown journey? As they have said, it's an unknown journey, and then kind of like circling back, like, hey, I made this tweet. I don't know if you saw this tweet, but it's like they're trying to throw a surprise party, but they don't want and they're doing it a second time, so everybody's onto them. So they're trying to throw another, and like, hey man, just go to this location, and just be there. It's not a surprise. Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. What? Just absolutely be there though. And it's like,
I saw that tweet and I was like, yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from with that. let me just say that I 100% agree with you that I think that the impactful character deaths, Zack, Aerith, Cloud's mom, all those different characters, and I would even include the Avalanche trio in that. Those are important moments because not only just to Cloud, but also to the other party members like Barrett and Tifa. They were deeply affected by losing the Avalanche trio, and it affects Tifa clear up until after OG. It's brought up in Nojima's other novel, Case of Tifa. On the way to a smile, she talks about having all these regrets about Sector 7 and everything. So all of these tragedies have an impact on the characters, which is why I'm reluctant to, even though visually, visually, it looks like I'm wrong. It looks like, oh yeah, they're bringing Zack back. He's to be alive and he's going to join up with a team and everything. But I am just reluctant to believe that because, first of all, one big aspect of FF7 from the OG that I firmly believe is going to play into Rebirth onward is the concept of red herrings. And honestly, every clip of Zack that we've been shown has been shown in isolation. We don't really know exactly what's going on. When these events are happening, we have no point of reference for any of it. It just happens. So how can we be certain that what we're seeing is what we think we're seeing? You understand?
The trailer said what is real, what is not.
Exactly. What is fact? What is fiction? You have to remember, we're dealing with Sephiroth, who
Genova
is
right?
going and Genova is absolutely. And what are they the masters of? They're the masters of manipulation, of illusion, of making you see things that aren't really there. So what's to say that these visions of Zack that we're seeing are even real and not just figments of Cloud's imagination? We don't know that. We absolutely do not know that. And I'm not saying I'm right about this. I could be completely off base right now. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing that out there as a wild possibility. And we could, I'm just saying, it's not completely out of the realm of possibility that Zack is actually not alive. And that would keep the significance of his death in place. It's just that I honestly think the developers are yanking our chains right now. That's what I think. I could be totally wrong.
Well, that's it's a fair theory, I'd say. I think it's fair. The only thing, my only thing where I think so many steps ahead, where I think end game type stuff, where I'm just like, where's the, and I'm not a story writer, so I can't really tell you, but like, it's like, it's gotta mean something, right? Other than just being, I mean, red herrings are great. That means a lot. Like, it's Sephiroth toying with, Genova is toying with Cloud. But I feel like it's got to mean something. And then also, will it also take away from Zack in a way? Like, if it is just him, you know, it's got to be important to Zack as well. It can't just be just Zack walking around and, you know, it's a red herring. So it's got to be important to the character of Zack, in which obviously Nomura has expressed that he's just as important as Cloud and Sephiroth. So I think that has to be... Huh? Oh, yeah. What'd you say?
Oh, I said absolutely.
Oh, okay. I know how much you love. I know how much you love Zack. I thought you were like, oh yeah. He sure is just as important. He's more important.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and see that's the other thing too. Is like I'm very like, I love his role in the story. Like, his sacrifice was one of the main things that drew me to him as a character. Like, I mean, I enjoy him, you know, just as a character because, you know, he's fun, he's energetic, and he's just a big ball of sunshine. You know, it's impossible to hate the guy. Right. And he's really fun to play as. But his sacrifice is what elevates him to the status of favorite character.
Yes.
Because of what he does. So I would just really hate to see that robbed from him, you know.
Yeah, and I actually...
And not only that, but the fact that it has...
I think you're pacing. So, you're pacing. No, you were cutting in and out there for just a second.
Okay, how about now? Am I good?
I think you're good now.
Okay. So, yeah, it's just one of those things where if they were to change that, that would be a major ding against this remake Rebirth project. Like, I would definitely take that as a negative if I really believe that they were gonna mess with that. And you know, there's a possibility that they mess with it and they ruin it. There is absolutely a possibility of that, but I'm not going to. I choose to look at the glass half full and hope for the best. Because, you know, I mean, I had a lot of misgivings about part one when it first came out. I'm like, oh God, what if they ruin this? And I ended up really enjoying part one because, you know, overall, with the exception of like the very last chapter, it really was pretty faithful to the original. You know, it was deeply expanded. I mean, they went into it and made a whole game out of just Midgard, which was crazy. But I enjoyed all of the new stuff that they added, and I was intrigued by everything. So if they can manage to replicate that same experience in the next two games, then I'm not going to have a problem with it.
Okay, yeah, I mean, like I agree to an extent where I think they did hit all the story beats. Sometimes I feel like they missed a beat, like but that's another conversation, I suppose. But like just with like the whispers being there to like interrupt things and every now and then, I guess.
Right. Yeah. The whispers are a big thing that people did not like. And
it's like you're rocking out on the drums and you accidentally hit the drum snare twice. You know, like you messed up a little bit. But so I actually want to throw this one over to Vinny because Vinny, you said that you never played Crisis Core. So.
Right.
But you obviously know the story of Crisis Core. I mean, you're a super fan.
Yeah, I watched it.
You know how it goes, man. You know how Zack's story is and everything. So here's the question for you and for Vinny and Tifa the Monk right now is, let's talk about that ending, right? Or let's talk about them, if it is true that they stick to the original Crisis Core. You know, they've straight up said this multiple interviews I've seen from Nomura and, you know, pretty much everybody saying like, hey, we're not touching Crisis Core. It's going to be exactly the same. But then like I get a little bit of a contradiction where you guys, I wanted to tie directly into, you know, the remake trilogy, and I'm like, okay. But like this is where Monk's theory comes in, where it's like, okay, that makes sense. Here's what I want to ask you, Vinny, since you've never played it and you experience, either you do or you don't, but let's just go with this option where you experience the death of Zack, and it is, trust me, man, when you when you see it and you play through the whole game and you get the whole story arc and everything, and then it culminates to that moment, it is so good, and it hits very hard. And you experience that. Zack dies. And then, let's just say I've seen some people on Twitter comment, and they're like, oh, I think there will be a post-credit scene. And post-credit scene, they show Zack walking away this time. Or it reverses back, and I think this is coming from Genesis 7's theory he shared to me. You guys can check that out. But let's just say halfway through the credits start to reverse and it goes back, and then Zack lives. It's the end of Remake, rather than the end of Crisis Core. How would that make you feel, as opposed to you just felt that emotional hit, that emotional impact, and then almost instantly it is reversed?
It would just feel devoid of meaning at that point.
Right.
Retconning stuff like that, because as my first experience, as almost everyone else's experience with Zack dying, comes from Final Fantasy VII OG, that scene where Cloud was in a Shinra uniform and sees Zack die. And then Crisis Core, when I watched through that, it kind of retconned that moment where Cloud was in a soldier uniform and Zack ended up dying outside of Midgar or something like that, right? So, that, when I saw that, because watching through Crisis Core, I was waiting for that moment, the moment where they're in Midgar and everything, and then when that was retconned, I was just like, that's just kind of odd that they just, what we saw in original didn't actually happen, because Crisis Core retconned that to be happening outside of Midgar. Cloud was in a different outfit altogether and everything. So having Crisis Core a post-credit scene where he walks away or something like that just feels like it's I'm trying to relate it to something else, but it's very similar to what you said, comic booky, where it's oh, this person's dead, but the next movie or the next comic book, they find out a way to go to an alternate universe or just find some way to make that person alive or change.
I'll be right back, maybe 10 seconds. Go ahead and keep talking, man.
Oh, yeah. So, I would like Crisis Core to remain the same as it was originally, but that was going to be basically what I harped on this episode is, they say they're going to leave Crisis Core alone, and it's going to be how it was in the original. Reunion isn't going to change anything. But at the same time, do we trust that they're not going to change anything? Because when Remake was coming out, I had trust, and then they changed a whole bunch of things, and not that they changed things, but they added things, and it was kind of like omission by addition. So things were changed drastically because of adding stuff instead of taking stuff away, which I feel like is just as harrowing as taking stuff away. So I was more curious to know, do you think the developers are being truthful when they say that they aren't going to change anything in Reunion, or do you feel like it's going to be a whole nother Remake situation where they say they're not changing anything? It's going to be good. It's going to be a story that veterans and newcomers alike will be able to grasp. And I believe you took a poll for that exact situation. So do you want to just basically touch on the poll real quick?
Yeah. Let me touch on that poll real quick then.
Oh man.
So the poll says, do you believe what they're saying about Crisis Core, or do you expect story changes such as an ending that ties directly into Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or Remake trilogy? And out of 518 votes, actually 54.8% says they don't believe them. which is
More than half.
interesting. To where I think what that kind of spawns the conversation of like, how did we get to this point? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
what? So it kind of gets me. If I guess justification or whatever, I feel like okay, I'm okay. I'm okay for thinking that I was about thinking my thoughts about remake beforehand, leading up to it, because apparently a lot of other people felt the same way. Because now we're at the point where 54.8% don't believe when the developers tell them something. Like straight up, and I mean like straight up telling them that it's not going to be changed. They still don't believe it. So yeah, go ahead. I just wanted to. That's the data. The data.
Right. So 54%. So more than half of people who polled in the survey don't believe the developers that they are not going to change anything about Reunion. And as somebody who's never experienced playing it, but I've watched the cutscenes and everything, like where do you fall on that poll? Like, do you where do you, oh man, where do you see yourself on that poll, Daniel? Like, do you think that they are going to change anything in Reunion, or do you think that they are going to keep it how it was in Crisis Core Original? Because if they keep it the same in Crisis Core Original, and they want it to tie into Rebirth, then that definitively means Zack is dead. Unless they do some timey-wimey stuff in Rebirth, which I don't think that's out of unheard of at this point either. But
I appreciate the Doctor Who lingo.
yeah,
Timey-wimey.
because if Reunion has Zack being definitively dead, then that raises questions as to why we see him doing certain things at the end of Remake.
Which is exactly what they want, right? That's exactly what they want.
Right, because they, in the interviews, they said that we don't want to change the original story drastically, but our challenge was, and I have it up, but I'm just not speaking verbatim, but they didn't want to change things drastically from the original, but they also didn't want to make the same exact game so that veterans of the series and of the compilation still had new mysteries to unfold. And like I said earlier, they don't want to take anything out, they don't want to eliminate anything, but I feel like they did not accomplish that because of the whole omission by addition. So if you add so many things, I feel like it does kind of take away or have to delete some things. Like Aerith saying the past is set in stone is supposed to make us feel confident that nothing is really going to change, yet she says the past is set in stone, yet we have members of Avalanche who are still alive, which would kind of counter, argue that the past is set in stone. So it's weird. It's weird to me because I feel like as a developer, you need the trust of your fan base, you need the trust and faith of the people who play your game, and if you don't have that, then it might just all be a marketing thing. If we were told from the beginning Final Fantasy VII Remake is going to change a lot of things and you guys might not be happy about it, what percent of people knowing that information would be like, I don't want to touch it then? And then so we got Remake and it was advertised the way it was advertised, and then we get Rebirth, and Rebirth is sort of being advertised as, look, we promise nothing is being changed. The crux of the story is still there.
Yeah, but
and everything.
See, it's I kind of want to jump in on that just to kind of like, I don't know, just to jump in and add this to where they did say all of those things, Vinny, yes. Mm-hmm. But they did exactly what they're doing right now. Wording is fancy, right? So the wording, they're very, I don't know if they're particular about their words or they're just not particular, like they're not planned out, like their words are not planned. So
they're, but again, it's going like to the advertising of, how many people would have played Remake.
So that's where I want to go, right? So I was trying to get through and get a bunch of interviews from the past leading up to remake to kind of contrast to what's going on right now, or compare, I guess, to what's going on right now. And it's very much the same. So I kind of wanted to jump in on there, Vinny, because they kind of did place these warnings, right? Not warnings, but like they kind of put in these signs to you that they are changing things. But I think what it was is our mindset was more along the lines of like expanding things, like Monk was talking about earlier with Tifa, and fleshing out the character, adding new, adding Roche, which is an amazing new character and everything like that. But they, like, here's one quote from the past. Who are involved in us who are involved in the remake were involved in the original Final Fantasy VII. There were people who created it, so in that sense, we don't think anything is untouchable. That isn't to say we're changing everything, of course. So it was like, there's a sign, so they're kind of doing something very similar. The last part of this is very important, quote, but we believe we know the balance between what can be changed versus what needs to be protected. So this is where I kind of want to clarify on things of what's happening right now. They're definitely, I think now, more than I did back then, where I thought I was being baited. I felt like I was being baited, I guess. And then they changed things up. I think this more now, and I'm human. I can change these, the way I think about it. I've learned, right, that I think they are very sincere, and I don't know whether or not that is comforting or concerning, but they're very sincere when they're saying that they're going to honor the original. But what does that mean to them is the question. So for us, since it is, I believe that once you release something out to the public, it is theirs now. Whether or not you worked on it for years and years, it is now the fans. It is now the people that have loved it and stuff. But they have created it, and now they're working on this remake. So what is the crux to them? And that, it kind of goes all the way back to what I was talking about earlier. And I'm going to bring this over to Monk, because we have Monk on the show. I want to talk to Monk. Get Monk's thoughts. What is the crux, the most important part, the most defining trait of Final Fantasy VII? And the question is, to them, and then what is it to you? And does it differ? Do you think it differs to whereas, maybe to them the crux of Final Fantasy VII is not what you think it is? You know what I mean? Maybe the crux of Final Fantasy VII isn't Zack dying. Maybe that wasn't that important to them. Maybe this is their thoughts. So whereas maybe it's not aligning with mine personally, to where the point where I'm like, you guys this is so fundamentally different, to whereas they're like, we're honoring it, man. It's like completely, maybe we're just not aligned on what we perceive Final Fantasy VII to be. So Monk, what is the crux of Final Fantasy VII?
Well, if we were to take the developers at their word, they have discussed themselves in multiple interviews in the past about the themes of FF7, and one of those themes being the theme of life, and of course of death and loss. And also I would even add in there self-discovery, because I think that is a huge part of Cloud's personal journey, is him coming into his own, becoming his own person. Because for a large portion of the game, he's someone who he's not. He's putting on a front for people, and of course Genova takes advantage of that and exploits it. And of course, you have the whole puppet master dynamic between him and Sephiroth. So that all comes to a head in the climax in the live stream scene, where Tifa helps Cloud find his true self. And then that's when everything starts to go in the right direction, when Cloud finds his true self again. And so to me, as long as that dynamic remains the same, because that is what I personally really deeply enjoy about this story, is Cloud's journey, seeing him come into his own,
Mm-hmm.
seeing him become the hero, even though he was just, in all reality, he's just an ordinary guy from a little mountain village, and he set out to join a soldier and he couldn't make the cut,
Yeah.
but through, and this also leads me to something else that is repeated in the trailers: through suffering you become strong.
Mm.
So through all of Cloud's suffering, through all the losses that he's incurred, through Nibelheim, losing his mother, losing his hometown, losing Zack, and later losing Aerith, and all these other different people who have helped him along the way,
Yeah.
through all that suffering, he becomes stronger. And
Yeah.
that is actually, in the Nibelheim incident itself, it's like the perfect dichotomy of that, because what happens when Cloud loses Nibelheim?
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't gone through any training. He is just a grunt at that stage, and he takes down Sephiroth at the pinnacle of his power,
Mm-hmm.
because he lost his hometown, he lost his mother, and then he sees Tifa lying there with a slash in her chest, and he flies into a rage, and he's able
Mm-hmm.
to take down Sephiroth.
Yeah. Yeah. So
That to me is one of the most important things that needs to remain the same in this story. If
I
they can keep that
100% agree.
intact,
Mm-hmm. Yes,
then
I believe I agree with you so much, and not only just for Cloud, but like for pretty much every character. It's always about, for me, the crux of Final Fantasy VII would be tragedy and overcoming that through friendship, or through unity, I should say, rather than doing it alone. Identity is a very big theme as well, and like you're saying, so those things that you're saying, and that's part of it, right? You find out who you are through the hardest points of your life. Like that's how you're hardened, or you go crazy like Sephiroth. It's one of the things. Like it's either you lose your mind or you unify. Sephiroth chose to be alone, and that's what happened to him. Whereas you
right.
unite. Where Barrett was almost down that same path, right? Like where he was going to, he realizes the error of his ways and stuff like that through that unity and everything. So it's like basically dealing with tragedy is the thing. And now, if that is the crux of Final Fantasy VII, like you said, Rebirth has to do it, right? They have to deliver, and it has to be a very emotionally impactful thing, to where now we have set our characters up to overcome this tragedy. But what if that's not the crux to them? Like, what if that maybe the crux is finding out, enduring and identity and stuff like that, where it's okay to bring these characters back to life, like Biggs, Wedge, Jesse, not dead, Zack, not dead, doesn't matter, because we're focused on this journey. And it's like, wait a second though, that's not aligning with what we think Final Fantasy VII is, because
But
yeah, like the tragedy of Zack, and like this is a relevant topic. That's why we're bringing it up now, because of Crisis Core coming out. It's a reminder of the tragedy of Zack, like or not tragedy, but like his heroic sacrifice, right? We're reminded of that now with that remake coming up, reunion coming up. So where it's like,
And mhm.
how important that moment is. Not only just it's important to the overall entire story of Seven. It is a very, very important moment. And what they're doing, and like you said, could be Sephiroth, could be Genova, they could be toying with you, and really, literally, this would be toying with the player as well as Cloud, and
Absolutely.
so
And
it,
that's
yeah, exactly, right.
mhm.
So it could end up being like they nailed this, like, oh my god, that's amazing. We're still getting that hard hitting tragedy and stuff like that in Rebirth, and it's really going to come double down on us, right? It's really going to double down
It's
on us.
gonna twist the knife.
Yeah, really twist that knife. And if that's the case, I'm okay with that. I like, please give me that ending, or give me that in Rebirth. Like, I will go back and say, you know what, I was wrong, and I'd be happy with it. But as of right now, and like instead of thinking ahead at what we want to be, what we think is going to be, we think about like right now with remake. Is it the crux of Final Fantasy 7? Like right now, I feel like the core of 7 is just in complete disarray, and maybe that's what they're hoping. That's what they want you to feel. But I feel like it's completely like it's blown up. There's
But
where's that?
so
Where's that?
See, now I might be in a little bit of a different mindset from
Okay.
you because I feel like remake was the starting point because you're not, of course, going to see the full picture in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
What they're going to do is they're going to lay down breadcrumbs.
Yes.
So and they're going to be sometimes very brief breadcrumbs. Like think about it from the OG standpoint. How much did we read the whole story of FF7 once we got through Midgard when you were playing the OG for the first time? Did you have any idea of what direction the story was going to take as soon as you left the gates of Midgard and you were out there on the golden map? Did you have any idea about what direction the story was going to go? Or were you kind of left in the dark a little bit?
Okay,
you didn't start understanding the full picture.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. You're really like cutting in and out, but I think I'm getting what you're saying.
Okay. How about now?
I think you're coming in much clearer now.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let me repeat what I was saying. How much did you, as the player, understand about the true journey of FF7 from the very beginning of the game? When you left Midgar for the first time you played OG, how much did you really understand about what was going on? Or did none of that start to make sense until later on? And then you look back.
I think honestly I would disagree. Or like I said, I would say that the opening 5 hours of Final Fantasy 7, I believe with the whole Midgar, and then if you throw in the calm flashback, I think the game gives you everything you need, and I think I think it gives you everything you need.
We haven't gotten to calm yet, though.
Well, yeah, I mean they kind of give you that a little bit in remake. They kind of give you the flashbacks and stuff, but it's not. Yeah, I completely agree. But I mean, like Midgar itself in the original Final Fantasy definitely is one of the best, I think, openings to any video game. Like I think, or any story really. Like I think it's a great, solid foundation. But I mean, even remake is a great, solid foundation of mystery, intrigue, and like all of this stuff. I think as a standalone, remake definitely is a great foundation, but it's not aligned with the original. And as you're saying, Monk, I do agree that they had to plant these mysteries and everything, and this is only the beginning. So this is the beginning of a larger story, and they have planted the mysteries. I think my not argument, but my just point of view would be that it's not aligned with the original's crux of the story, if I have to say that. I'm just keep saying that just because that's what I was hung up on so much, where I don't feel like it's aligned with the crux of Final Fantasy 7.
Right. I think a lot of that has to do with the pacing, and I will say that is I could say a minor gripe that I have with the remake is that I do feel like there was too much information given early on that was not explained, and therefore led to a lot of people feeling about the story, especially in that last chapter. I think there was a lot of stuff that, and quite honestly, as much as I love that last Sephiroth battle, I would have preferred if they had held some of the Sephiroth stuff off until later on, because that was one of the things that I really enjoyed about the OG, was all this mystery around Sephiroth. And you never really understand who he is until much later on. He just kind of shows up, and and you have this sense of, ooh, he's like this foreboding figure, but you have no idea what he's really capable of, who he is, what his background is. And unfortunately, I feel like remake did kind of take some of that away from him. As fun as it was seeing him this early on in the game, but again, that could be part of the added mysteries that they're having Sephiroth take a much more active role, and especially when it comes to toying with Cloud and stuff. So it seems like that's the version of Sephiroth that they want to show us. The other gripe, like I said before, the way they handled the big info dump at the end of, like, what was it, chapter 18, is when they start really piling all this crazy info on you and not even really giving you a chance to process it. And they're like, oh, story's over until we meet again. And you're just like, wait, what? What was that? And you're just kind of sitting there with your mouth open, like that one SpongeBob meme where you're just sitting there and just with your mouth open, like, what? What just happened?
Right. Yeah. I mean, they
So
definitely
I
look
would have
3
definitely
years,
handled
2.5
that
years.
differently. I mean, even now, 2 years after the fact, I'm still just
We're still
kind of
talking.
bitching about it
Yeah.
because I still am not happy with the way they handled that last chapter. I think some of that could have been held off till Rebirth, and I think maybe a lot of fears and a lot of mis, I might be speaking out of turn, but a lot of misgivings that people are having about the next part maybe wouldn't be quite so prevalent if they had handled that last chapter a little bit better.
Yeah. I mean, they've.
So
Especially
Yeah. Go ahead.
I don't know, man. You're losing me here, Nomura. You're losing me. So I'm absolutely, I'm definitely a fan of remake, and I will even go so far as to say I'm an apologist for it. But there are some things that even I will be like, you know what, that could have been handled better.
so after
So
after listening to you guys speak on this, I have a question for both of you. I feel like I know Daniel's answer, but I'm curious to see Monk's answer. So for both of you, do you think Final Fantasy VII Remake is a remake or a sequel?
I don't think it's really either, to be entirely honest. It doesn't fit into either category neatly. I think it's really difficult to come up with an exact answer for it, because my specific view on it is that it is a coming together of all of these different projects and stuff.
Yeah.
So, because I mean, in order for it to be a sequel, it would have to essentially, it's not replacing the OG, but at the same time, I don't feel like it's a direct sequel to the OG either.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Because
Like,
we get
this is a new creature entirely that we're dealing with here, at least in my view.
Can I
Right,
give you?
and-
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Vinny. I just have a quote from one of the interviews. But go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say there are certain parts of remake where they allude to the fact that Aerith has seen these things happen before, and she knows what's going to happen already, which is what made a lot of people believe that it was more of a sequel than it was a remake.
Yeah.
And if it is an amalgamation of the compilation, correct me if I'm wrong, but like from what I'm getting, is Final Fantasy VII a remake to you to fit it in a category is more like we have all of these past games like Dirge of Cerberus, Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII Original. We have the novels and everything. That this is more of a we're throwing everything together to remake. Basically, it's Final Fantasy VII compilation remake. So it's them making everything fit cohesively. And
Yeah.
so with that, again, brings it back to Crisis Core. There were a lot of things in Crisis Core that somewhat changes how we felt about original, because there is, and I'm not a huge fan of this, but there is the whole Nibelheim incident was more of a Genesis thing than it was a Sephiroth thing, really, because that's what
Genesis
they
helped. Yeah, he definitely
helped.
was
Yeah,
there. Yeah, he was there.
but in original he
If
wasn't, and so are we going to see that in Rebirth? Like, is
100%.
Genesis? But so if that's the case, a lot of people are upset with Genesis's character. So if they do not change Crisis Core, then they're going to fall into the same trap of, the Western audience does not like Genesis's character. I'm correct me if I'm wrong. I think Genesis was well received in the East, but I think it was more of a failure in the Western, like Western
Yeah,
fans.
I was not a fan at all.
Oh.
I mean, I just played Crisis Core pretty recently, like I would say 6 months ago or so, and I got to that point, and I'm just like, oh god, I forgot they put him in the Nibelheim incident.
Yeah.
I don't like
Yeah.
this.
It's going to be in
So
there
I mean,
100%, I
it's
feel
gonna
like.
be in there, and
Mhm.
that's one of those things that I I mean, again, I'm being a positive person, but that doesn't mean I'm going to enjoy every single change that they make. Like, I like Crisis Core overall,
Mhm.
especially like the last half of it, but there are certain things that Crisis Core introduced that I'm not a fan of at all.
Mm.
And the Nibelheim incident being tweaked with was one of my big ones that I was like, ugh, I don't like this.
Yeah, no, I'm
Because
And
the
right there with
Nibelheim
you, Monk.
incident is like sacred to me. It's like sacred to me. So like, don't touch it, don't
Yeah.
mess with it, leave it alone.
Yep. Yeah,
right,
I
and
100%.
in one of the interviews, it says here, and I guess this kind of, um, you know how you were talking about what does the crux mean to the developers? In one of the interviews, which I have all the screenshots, but I don't, for the sake of time, I don't want to just sit through them.
Mhm.
But they say the number one defining moment, like the most important moment in Final Fantasy VII, was the Nibelheim incident.
I saw
So
that. Yeah, they did say that.
right, so to me that kind of talks about what they see as being integral.
Mhm.
So it they I'm curious to see what if they change anything in Crisis Core for that exact reason, because they think Nibelheim is the most important thing that happens
There's
in
been
Final Fantasy VII.
there's been a lot
Which
of different iterations of the Nibelheim incident too. Right. Like
right,
Yeah.
yeah, with
I,
and
Crisis Core being there too. Mhm.
you
and
have
they don't.
Core Crisis, you have the Last Order
Mhm.
anime, which that one raises a lot of
That
problems
one
too with some
definitely
people because
it took some liberties.
that one definitely took some liberties. Like, why does Cloud have Mako eyes already when he hasn't been through the treatments yet? Like, what is going on here?
Yeah. And didn't
Um,
Sephiroth
there
just
there is
jump
one
off?
scene that I really like about it, but aside from that, I'm just like, I mean, I like it, but there's also some things that are like, oh, this
Yeah.
goes against canon. What's going
Mm.
on?
Which one is
And
it?
well,
I'm trying to get my games or story straight. Which one is it that Sephiroth just jumps into the live stream rather than Cloud throwing
That's
him?
Last Order.
Last Order.
That's
Okay.
Last Order where he just
So
jumps
that at
in, and I
least
was
we
like,
know that Crisis Core Reunion is going to retain at least Cloud is going to be the one to do it, right?
yes, they better because that's his shining moment. Don't let
Yeah.
my boy have his
Did not
shining
like
moment.
that at
Dang it!
all with Last Order. I was like,
No,
what are
like
you?
let him toss Sephiroth like a
Yeah.
bag of potatoes.
It
Okay,
seems like
please.
Remake is keeping that anyway, just because he said well, he could be referring to something else too. But Sephiroth, he says, "I killed you" or something like that, and Sephiroth goes, "Oh, you don't have to remind me," type thing. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
so he's
that
either
was like his
referring to the
first
Nibelheim
encounter.
thing, or he's referring to Sephiroth being in the future and he got killed then.
How many times has this man died
Yeah,
now?
he just keeps dying. He comes back. He said, "I will never be a memory." So Katase and
but
Nomura, just to answer your question, Vinny, I want to answer your question with the developers answering your question. It says so to the new Crisis Core. So the new Crisis Core is linked to the original Final Fantasy VII, but not the remake. And this is coming from latestgamestories.com, written by Garmin Phillip. Nomura and Katase say, quote, that's a tough question to answer because, of course, we haven't revealed everything there is about to reveal about the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy. The question implies that the original Final Fantasy VII and the Final Fantasy VII Remake do not exist in the same timeline. And the truth is, we still have mysteries in that regard that we haven't revealed yet. How the story ends up, where it's going, is a huge mystery, so I can't give you a direct answer. However, Crisis Core's story is relevant to the original Final Fantasy VII. It takes place in the same timeline, but it is also relevant and part of Remake Trilogy's timeline. So that answer is basically telling you that, yeah, I think, in my personal opinion, I think it is kind of a continuation, because it's hard to call it a sequel, but I guess it is a sequel if it is the rumors are true, where like Sephiroth and Aerith are able to go back to the starting point of Remake and now just completely wreck things. Whether it was Aerith's idea or Sephiroth's idea, we don't really know. But to go back and now it's just completely like we can change it. Aerith says it in Rebirth's trailer. Aerith literally starts the trailer off with saying the past is, you can't change the past. It's written. It's there. But we can change the future. And I think what she means by that is everything that happens in Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII, Advent Children, Dirge of Cerberus have all happened already. That is indeed the past. Whereas now Aerith is talking about the future can be changed, which means that past, which is the future, can be changed. So that's where my mindset is on it all. Like, whereas now it's like, and that makes me also think that maybe it's Aerith is the one that decided, like, Sephiroth is still terrorizing the planet even after we've killed him. We have to go back and change things. Right. And I think it also is Aerith.
So now in the original, Jenova is tainting the live stream, right? Because she
in
went
Advent
in
Children, she goes in, like, and Jenova and Sephiroth refuse to fuse with the live stream, so they're able to infect it, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
And if Aerith becomes one with the live stream, couldn't that also mean that Jenova is like Aerith is Jenova touched? Oh wow, that would be interesting. No,
Aerith is the twist villain. Okay.
Yeah, right. Aerith is the twist villain. Yeah, like she's actually being controlled by Jenova right now. Yeah.
That would be crazy, dude.
But no, like, so, like, in that book, Vinny, I think it's On the Way to a Smile. They actually do show Livestream Black and Livestream White, and basically showing that Aerith and Sephiroth are still at war. Even in the live stream, they're still at war, whereas Sephiroth is going around and just still, like, basically tainting the planet, infecting the planet. Even people that die, he goes up to them in the live stream and just convinces them to hold on to the hatred and the anger and, like, never fuse with the live stream the way it's supposed to be. And that's basically what causes the Geosigma and stuff like that. So what makes me think is that after all of that happens, Aerith is like, I gotta change it. This is my opinion. I think Aerith is the one going back to change things. So is it a sequel? I'd say yes. And then that's where I'm like, I think it's almost impossible, in my opinion, in my mind, for this story to continue the way that original did. Right. Especially with throwing theories out the window, Vinny and Monk. Like, throwing theories out the window, taking what we know with Remake and what they have done with Remake. And in fact, even the trailer for Rebirth, it is so different than what's happening in the original. Like, I know a lot of people are like, no, like the core of Final Fantasy VII story is going to continue the way it is. Sure, Rufus is going to go to the parade. He's the new president. They're on the hunt for Sephiroth, so they're going to go to Calm, Mithril Mines, Junin, and then they're going to bounce around in the same format, just like Remake did, where it's going to flow on those beats, right? The beats are still going to happen because, in a way, their intentions are the same: hunt down Sephiroth, and bring him down. Like that's how the original ended: hunt down Sephiroth. But in their mindset is going to be completely different than the original. Their mindset, the way these characters are going to act in these moments that are going to happen from the original, is going to be completely different, because there's no way that they're going to forget about how they defied destiny. It's Final Destination now, whereas they know that they defied destiny. Now that how they're going to handle that from now on when they get to, I don't know, Junin or whatever, wherever, or the first moment they see on the cargo ship, they see Sephiroth. That moment is going to be different. Like, that's not going to be the same, I don't think. There's probably going to be Sephiroth antagonizing him more throughout the game. His Aerith is already talking about defying or changing the future. She never talked about changing the future in the original. Like, she never, like, these are things that was not their driving force in the original. So their driving force is different. The places they go and the storylines that are kind of happening uh, regardless of how their actions that they took in remake. Like so, like I said, Rufus is now the new president, so he's going to go there. Although Rufus has seen the whispers, right? So that's kind of interesting. So now he knows something's a little up, little off. But other than that, like things are going to kind of go the way they go. But
Right.
their motivations are going to be different. Sephiroth's motivations are completely different than they were in the original. So at some point in Rebirth, say chapter 16 or 17, it's going to go completely way off track.
Right. And so my point to the question I asked you guys about is this a sequel or a remake? It lies within if you were in the camp that I basically both answers. It whether you think that this is a sequel, which to me drastically alters the original and its core, because of driving forces, or if this is an amalgamation of the compilation, which, if you take everything that the compilation is at face value, drastically changes the original concept of the game, because there's all this new media for it. Of course, when you add stuff, there you do take away from other places, because you have to create new stories, and sometimes new stories take away meanings of original stories. So I think that altogether, this is what lends itself to 54% of the people that took that survey do not trust the developers, because it's, to them, it has been drastically changed. And my guess is, or prediction, is that when we get to Cosmo Canyon for the first time, and the party is at Cosmo Candle, that is when we're gonna really find out where the story is heading, because that is when everybody talks about that. That's when they reflect on their driving forces. I mean, everybody has a different reason for why they're in the party.
That's
and
right.
I feel like if we have something similar in Cosmo Canyon, I mean, that's a pretty integral moment. So they're probably going to keep it in, because they're saying they're not going to eliminate key aspects of the story. I feel like, and this is me personally, the developers might not agree with this, but I feel like Cosmo Canyon was a huge driving force.
Huge.
Even for Red 13, who you didn't really know what his driving force was until Cosmo Canyon, when he basically gets a new driving force when he finds out what happens with his father. So I feel
That's
like
one of the best moments in the game.
that's probably my favorite. The Red 13 story with Seto is absolutely my favorite. That's one of the things where I see a lot of stuff saying, nothing's going to be abridged, but we do have to follow. We might need to follow different pathways. Like, we might visit places at different times. When they get to Cosmo Canyon, I am hoping that Cosmo Canyon, and Seto more specifically, gets the whole Midgar treatment, where that whole story is fleshed out with Red 13, his father, and then I forget what part of the compilation talks about this. It was in a novel. I think it was on Path to a Smile or whatever, where they talk about how there's another creature like Red 13, the female, which is how he's able to have.
Oh, that's before Crisis.
Oh, that's before Crisis?
Yes, and I think her
Okay.
name is Dinah or something or Dina,
Right.
something like
Right.
that.
And that's basically how they explain how at the end of the after credit cutscene for Final Fantasy VII, you see Red 13 running with a bunch of cubs, which was, back then it was like, how did that happen if he was the last of his kind? So I would like to see all of that stuff in Rebirth get fleshed out. And, not for nothing, even if the story is drastically changed, like me personally, I believe how the story is going to be drastically changed. I'm along for the ride, whether it's the same story that we got or they're going to change it. I'm along for the ride, because there are a lot of things in Final Fantasy VII Original that I want to see get fleshed out. So even if it's not the same story that was basically promised, and they do change a whole lot of things, I'm still excited to see Cosmo Canyon get fleshed out, Wutai get fleshed out, Sid and Shira get fleshed out. Like, there's so many things that I still want to see get fleshed out.
Yeah.
Even if it's not the same story, I'm okay with it. Do I trust the developers right now? I'm teetering. It's like I trust that they're gonna give me a good story because they have in the past, but I don't trust that it's gonna be the story that I think it's going to be. I think they're going to change it. But at the same time, if they give me the whole Wutai Cosmo Canyon, more deep lore on Seto, I will still be satisfied with however this game turns out.
Okay, guys, I kind of want to I want to get some closing thoughts here, as we've passed over the hour mark, but it's fine with me. But so I want to get Tifa, the monk, your closing thoughts here, or at least don't feel like you have to like rush these thoughts, but basically based off of everything that you've got from the interviews the other day or yesterday. I can't remember, days blend together. Basically everything that has happened recently with the news. What's your thoughts on all of it? I don't know if we ever got like your thoughts. I think you said at the beginning that you were a little it answered a lot of your questions, concerns, and you're just really excited about it. But can you add on to that?
Yeah, basically just I am, like I said, I'm optimistic for the future of the series. I did have some questions, especially after, like I said, I really didn't like that last chapter of Rebirth. And I did have a lot of questions and stuff. And, there are some things that I am still a little concerned about, but after hearing what the developers had to say, a lot of my fears have been put at ease. Because they're saying all the things that I was concerned about. Like, they're talking about keeping all the memorable moments there. Even if it's, like I said, I'm not requiring for Rebirth and whatever the name of the last game is to be a carbon copy of OG. I know, I realize that there are people in the fandom who are upset that this isn't a carbon copy of the OG, and unfortunately, you're not going to be able to please everybody. There's always going to be some faction of the fandom who's going to be dissatisfied with this project. But at least for me personally, as long as they tell a good story and as long as they keep the characters faithful and their stories faithful, and I feel like nothing important is being taken away from them, then I'll be satisfied with whatever story they give me. Even if it's not a carbon copy of the OG, as long as they keep things faithful as they possibly can, and I'm still able to hit those emotional highs and lows that the original did, then I'm all for it. And maybe I'm a little bit too much of a simple fan compared to some other people who are like deep thoughts and us and picking this project apart and going, oh, this is gonna be
that's okay.
But you know what? That's the nature of the beast. That's the nature of fandom. Some people are going to be happy with it. Some people are going to be absolutely infuriated with it. And as for me, who knows? I might be completely disgusted with this project. I'm not saying anything about that yet because I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know any more than anybody else does in this fandom. Once in a while I might get somebody who might leak me something, but that's few and far between. I'm just a regular fan like everybody else. I'm getting the same that everybody else is. So I'm just choosing to interpret it the way where I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for the project to turn out well. That's my whole thing. And seeing the amount of passion and amount of love and respect the developers, and I truly believe this, and I'm with you on the same page as you, Daniel, where you say, oh, everyone is, I believe they're sincere. I do believe that developers are sincere in their love for this project. I mean, this is their cash cow. This is their golden goose.
Yeah.
They know they can't mess this up.
Yeah.
And some people might think that they've already messed it up. I'm not on that same boat. I think that they are trying their best. And quite honestly, with the volume of interviews coming out with them saying what they're saying, I can almost guarantee you that the developers are very well aware of all the discourse happening in the fandom. I'm sure they're very well aware of all the people going, "Oh God, they're gonna ruin it. They're gonna change everything." And they're like, "Oh my God, okay, time to do some more interviews, guys. Time to time to go out, placate the masses again. Look, guys, we're not gonna destroy your favorite game. Okay, calm down."
I feel like that
At
is
least
the
that's the impression that I'm getting anyway. I could be wrong, but that's just what the impression I'm getting from it. And I just the developers are probably they have their finger on the pulse. They know what's landing and what's not landing. I'm sure they're keeping tabs on everything. So, I choose to have at least a certain level of faith in them that they can deliver something that I can enjoy. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
yeah.
I know what I'm expecting out of this game, and as long as I get what I enjoy out of it, then that at the end of the day, that's all I can ask of them.
That's very well said. And like I kind of made a video a couple weeks ago about when they announced the name Rebirth, and I had said that like about the unknown journey and stuff like that being comforting in a sense to say, okay, this is not going to be like it's accepting what it is. So what you said is like I know my expectations, and my expectations, I'm excited about what I'm thinking about. And I think where a lot of the discourse comes in is it really was the name remake, to where it's a double entendre. We all get that, but I think it was that the name remake wasn't what they wanted it to be, and I thought that Rebirth is such a great name because I'm like, oh, now it's telling you that, hey, don't expect it to be the same story in a way. That's what it told me. And Nomura, like, this was an interview that Turquoise Hammer translated. And basically, the interviewer says, like, the same crux, you say, huh? Final Fantasy VII Remake had the same crux, yet it ended up feeling like a very different game. So basically, Nomura responds to that, quote, we are, of course, aware that some people might think it better to simply leave the original as it is and make the presentation more beautiful without changing anything else. However, if that had been the scope, I don't think we would have been able to invest as much time in creating it as we have. Back when we first got the project off the ground, we wanted to make sure that even the people who played the original game would enjoy the new experiences and new narrative developments through its content. That was the task we had to tackle. So I really do think that, and it goes back to what, I think they truly believe in what they're saying, which is something that I myself am going back on what I said in the past. So where in the past I said that I felt, I mean, it's not wrong, it's how I felt. I felt baited, and then they switched it up on me. To where it's something that I really wanted, they promised it, and then they surprise party me, and that's kind of like how I felt. And now with the name Rebirth, I really do think that this is a great thing for people to say, okay, it's not remake part 2, because that would imply that we're continuing on with a remake. It's a rebirth of Final Fantasy VII, and it's the rebirth of somebody in the game, a character or something. But basically, they're saying that they want to keep the original spirit alive. And this is just me summarizing what I said, but it feels like it depends on what they think the crux of Final Fantasy VII is, as opposed to what you think the crux of Final, like the viewer right now listening. What you think it is could be different from what they think it is. And they truly believe it. They're not trying to bait and switch anymore. Like, I don't think that's the case. I think they just truly believe that they're doing something that will be special, that will invoke the same feelings and stuff. So Tifa, the monk, the question is now to close it out with the two things, Crisis Core and Rebirth. With Crisis Core Reunion, just to recap, I guess, your thought. With Crisis Core Reunion, do you feel that it will stay the same? like the entire story, even after everything we've talked about today? Do you think it will stay the same, or will it have maybe a secret ending or a different ending that ties directly in?
I think it's going to stay the same.
Stay the same.
Honestly, I do.
Okay.
And I guess we'll see sooner or later. I mean, it's coming out pretty quick, so we'll see sooner or later. But I do think that it's going to stay the same.
There you go. And then the last thing is with Rebirth. Basically, I think you've already kind of recapped your thoughts on Rebirth, so I won't make you repeat yourself. But basically, that's it. Vinny, I don't know if you've been keeping an eye on chat, but I do want to make them. Everybody who's watching right now, thank you so much for tuning in. Sorry that we haven't been keeping up with the chat and answering any questions. Were there any questions in chat that we can quickly answer before we close out the show? Thank you so much, Monk, for being on the show. I love hearing your thoughts on this. And as you said, you were like, I'm not that kind of person that can break down every single little detail of the game and everything. But that's awesome, right? I think you're the fan. Your passion shows for Final Fantasy VII, and that is exciting. That right there is what's awesome. So thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you so much for your theories and input. I love what you said about Zach and stuff like that. They did like jumping into the church and nobody responding. That is mine. I was like, wait a second, you're onto something. But yeah, so thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. And thank you for having me on here. I enjoy talking with you gentlemen, and I look forward to the next chance when we get to talk. And hopefully, I'm really hoping, crossing fingers, that we get a new trailer during Tokyo Game Show in September.
Oh gosh, at some point, I feel like the next trailer, if I had to predict, I would say it's going to be Game Awards. I think we'll get Game Awards, and then Tokyo Game Show. They'll leave that for 16. I think they'll leave that at 16.
I've been here.
Yeah, I don't know if they want to double up on it, like two Final Fantasy reveals in one show. I mean, maybe E3 2023 is looking great. But all right, guys. Let's see.
Monk, do you want to plug your how people can follow you, best places to follow you, anything like that for chat?
Oh, yeah. Just follow me on Twitter. My @ is, of course, Tifa the Monk on Twitter. And yeah, that's pretty much my main platform. I do have a YouTube channel too, but I don't really upload on it very often, so I don't know if I'm going to promote that too much. But yeah, just follow me on Twitter.
Oh, I think we lost you there, but
a little bit.
I went ahead and put it on the chat. I put it on the screen. I finally wrote your name up there.
Okay. Yeah, it's fine. It's just Tifa the Monk on Twitter. Did that come through that time?
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome.
Okay, good.
I put it in chat if anybody wants to. I don't think it's linked, but you could just type that in on Twitter, and that'll bring you to their page on Twitter.
All right, you guys, everybody in chat, I see everybody was having some fun with this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. Differing viewpoints, which is always great, as long as it's all respectful. I have no quarrel with that.
And it looks like Crane is doing a subathon right now.
Well, let's bring you guys over to Crane. What do you guys say? Let's bring it over to Crane. Now show Crane some love, okay? When we do that. Vinny, when I'm going to give you the go-ahead here in just a second. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Tifa the Monk. Thank you, Vinny, for being part of this one. All right, everybody, take care. Sending it over to Crane. Show Crane love.
All right.
There he goes.
Okay, in 8 seconds.
8 seconds. Get those.
Right, show Crane some love.
Get it ready. All right, so it's like, what is it? That's it. Close it out. Done. All right, cool. Stop stream.